everyone, welcome back. We are here today talking with Natasha Chai, a hobbyist writer or author, for those of you who want to use that title. How are you doing today?
I am good, thanks.
Awesome.
How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Good.
Super excited to be here and speak with you today. We're also going to do some art, which is going to be super fun. But before we kind of dive into that, we can start with you just telling us a bit about you.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I was born in Perth, Australia, and but came here when I was like 1 or 2 years old. And so I basically, while I wasn't born in Alberta, I basically was raised and I grew up here. And all my family is here. Been married for like 20 years almost. We have 2 boys, and so our families are all here. Yeah, pretty much living a normal life here.
Perhaps we should start on our little art project.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. So, so today we're going to be doing paint by numbers, and I can tell you later a little bit about how I even got into it. But before we do that, so like blind boxes are a big thing these days with Pop Mart stuff and Labu's and everything. So this is kind of like a blind box sort of a thing. You can't really see, really, I don't think, what you're going to be painting, but you can pick and choose. So I've got about, 5 bags for us to choose from. So you can pick what you think is what you'll be painting. So
pick this one. Okay. It says paint on it.
All right. All right. Paint by numbers is basically what we call it. You've got usually a canvas, right, of an image, and the image itself, I don't think the camera can see it, but you've got numbers, right? So right, so there are sections.
I don't know if you can see it.
In this snow, but if you were to kind of look
Tiny
up close,
little numbers.
there you go, tiny numbers, and whatever the number says on each section of the painting is what you paint. And so, like we said, that there were numbers on each of the paintings in here, right? So as an example, if you go on to mine, I don't know, I'll just pick whatever brush. Dip it into the water, loosen up the brush. And so my painting canvas here says number 3. And so I would just basically look for the number 3 painting and just paint.
Beautiful.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And now we just paint.
Now you just paint, right? I mean, and there's so many different types of paint by numbers I've learned. So I got into this because about 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with something called hemiplegic migraine. And it's a type of migraine where once if an attack comes, I present those symptoms as stroke symptoms. So I could be, even now, I could be talking to you, and all of a sudden, without any warning or anything, I could start to slur my words. I could start to basically lose all function on, for the most part, the left side of my body, can't move, can't talk. Depending on when the paralysis hits, if I end up being by, say, a staircase or whatever, I have also fallen downstairs, got concussions, became unconscious for a bit, and then it takes quite some time to get back to normal again in terms of being able to move and talk and speak. And depending on the attack, there may be times where you lose your memory for a little bit too as well. And so you gotta literally find yourself and kind of get grounded again. So it's no cure. It's like a migraine in the sense that when it comes, it comes. The only difference is that I don't necessarily have the head pain that most people get when they do get migraines. So,
your migraine manifests itself in those stroke-like symptoms as opposed to in a physical hurt of the head.
Yeah. So probably about, I want to say maybe, how is it now? Probably maybe 5-6 years ago, I was talking to my neurologist, and he had suggested that, obviously every time a migraine attack comes, even for those who have migraines that manifests in head pain and all of that, right? It basically is trauma, and it's trauma that goes through your brain. And so, he suggested that, when I'm in my recovery phase, one of the things is obviously keep keep moving because you want to kind of get back to moving and not staying still all the time. But he had also said, like, that I may want to explore some things that could exercise my brain. And so he talked about, learning a new instrument, or, writing, or, painting, drawing, and all of that. And of course, immediately when he was talking about that, I immediately went to writing, and totally kind of crossed off the painting side of things. And then, I go back home that same day, go on social media, and a advertisement or some kind of promotional thing came on. And they were promoting this activity called Paint by Numbers. And I'm looking at the demo, and I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at the beautiful paintings that people have done. And like, this is kind of cool. And I'm looking into a little bit more, and they're like, basically, Sin, you don't need to have much skill into all of this. Just, follow the numbers, and something beautiful will be created. I looked into it even more so, and they talked about no matter what type of painting that you do, painting is, it definitely helps with the neuroplasticity in your brain. It even helps to regenerate brain cells too, for some. It definitely helps with motor skills. And that was definitely something that I needed to do whenever I needed to recover from an attack. And if nothing else, it was a good stress reliever. So as you can imagine, whenever an attack did come or does come, it is quite stressful to yourself, never mind your family members who have to be around you as well to take care of you and whatnot. So I just said at that time, thinking, what the heck, nothing to lose, I'll buy myself a really simple package. And I did. And I just fell in love with it. It's the calmness, I'd say, that I fell in love with. It was, sounds a little bit funny, but being able to, at the end of a project, being able to see that you can actually create something from nothing, and create something beautiful and pleasing to the eye. And that you still have that ability to do that, because 8 weeks ago, or even 2-3 months ago, you were someone that couldn't even walk or feed yourself or dress yourself, and then to be able to create something like this that people find cute or beautiful, it's a really nice feeling.
It's a very nice reminder that just because you can't do something one day doesn't mean you can't do it the next, or try it out at a different time, because we all need
That's absolutely right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can't say that I have always felt that way. I was diagnosed over, 10 years ago, but it wasn't an easy diagnosis. And so for a long time, it was, between just umpteenth doctor visits and tests and a whole bunch of stuff to even figure out what was wrong with me. Mm-hmm. You certainly didn't get that sentiment, when you're going through all of this. And I think even the most hardest part is, just in a way, and I know it's not the case, but in the moment, you also feel a lot of guilt because you've got people that are around you, and lucky enough, I have family members that care about me a lot. And when you're going through something, and when you yourself aren't even sure what is wrong with you, you do find yourself in a little bit of a state, of a darker state. So it isn't easy, I'd say, all the time to be able to kind of look on the bright side and seeing that there is light at the end of the tunnel. But I've still always thought too, is there's always a choice, with the cards that you're dealt with. And you either go left or right, and so, or front or back. In my case, I was, I'd say definitely because I have loved ones with me all the time. I have fantastic friends to provide that network of support, which I'm sure anybody with an illness or a chronic condition or whatever would attest that is absolutely having a support network. a supportive network to kind of egg you on, if you will, is very important. And it's definitely something that I myself do not take for granted, and know just how very lucky that I am to be able to have folks that are around me all the time.
In the earlier days, maybe like pre-diagnosis, what was your experience like? I know when you're saying like umpteenth doctor visits, what was that like for you?
It was scary, I'd say. When you don't know what your future is going to be like. When I was first, so when this all started, I remember it was in 2013. My son was all of our youngest boy was all of 2 years old. And, so we had a young family. My husband actually found me in the middle of the night in bed, trying to talk, but couldn't. He had told him, and my husband's quite a stoic man, right? And so he doesn't, he's quiet most of the time and all of that. 2 or 3 in the morning, I'm trying to reach out for him because I knew that something was wrong, but you didn't know exactly what was wrong. And so here I am just trying to reach over and trying to tell him something was wrong, but I couldn't. And it was the scariest, most surreal, just the weirdest thing, where I knew what I wanted to do and wanted to say, but I just couldn't. So you're trapped in this shell of a body. And I think in my book, I talked about, it felt as though, that half of my body was on this edge of a table or something. I just couldn't feel it. So at any rate, I managed to grunt out something to wake him up. He turns on the light, and I will never, ever forget how his expression was that night, because after it was all done and ending, my husband was saying in that moment, he thought I was done for. He said he couldn't recognize my face. I clearly was struggling. And, in retrospect, realized that it was probably because my face was half drooped. I couldn't talk, even though I wanted to. And I had no feeling on my left side at all. So it was like a stroke symptom sort of a thing. They called EMS. I go to the ER. And by the time I went to the ER, thankfully, the feeling was starting to come back. And so the feeling is a lot of the time it's your pins and needles coming back, right? There's some heat kind of, sort of thing. And I was able to talk and formulate words finally. And so originally they, of course, ERs do what they do. They wheel you off to the MRI, thinking that it was a stroke. And you get your scans and whatnot. And remember, the very first neurologist that I had, asked you a lot of questions in terms of your family history and lifestyle and all of that. And at the end of it all, he had told me, don't think that it was a stroke. Nothing, they didn't find anything wrong with my brain scan. It looked fine, but obviously wasn't fine. So at the time, I still didn't regain my motor skills back or any of that yet. Still in bed, and so he said that he suspected that it was a migraine. So once again, both me and my husband were quite distressed and didn't believe him when he said that. And, and that's when he kind of explained a little bit more. And that this was my first kind of, I guess, insight into the severity of migraines. Like before, in a previous life, in high school or university or whatnot, you get headaches, you got maybe a migraine pain for a little while, right? But it kind of came and went. And, but when the neurologist was explaining to us, he had let us know that in fact there are at least at the time anyways, upwards of 12 different types of migraines people could have.
12?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, and would you know it, my type of migraine that he thought I had at the time was one of the most severe ones. So severe and rare though, and so rare that 1 in 10,000 in the world would get it.
Oh my goodness.
I just happened to be one of them.
So, the lucky one.
Yeah, I was the lucky one. So after, telling my husband that we should probably buy a lottery ticket too, but we still haven't won anything. But
it's coming.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what he says too. We just need the one. He had said that it's a very rare condition, and it manifests differently. But the catch is that migraines overall, if you are diagnosed with migraines, especially with the ones that I have, it's not a diagnosis where it's like other conditions where you can get an x-ray or you can take a blood test and they do the test and then they can say, yep, this is what you've got. To be diagnosed with what I have, it had to be a diagnosis, what they termed as a diagnosis of exclusion. And which means you had to go through a whole bout of tests first to confirm you didn't have any of these other things that they suspect. And if you're still coming out normal or the results are still coming out fine, then that's what you got because you're healthy and normal otherwise. But you're obviously not healthy otherwise. So that was the start of a duration of blood tests after blood tests, MRI scans, CT scans, lumbar punctures, the whole shebang. And then of course everything came out normal at that time. And then I don't know, it could have been that very first night when that first attack happened, it kind of triggered. But after that first night, I would get the paralyses quite often, maybe for every month, 3 to 6 weeks, sort of a thing, random too as well. The good news was that when I did get them, it was a rather quick recovery period. And so I'd get the paralyses in the moment, and it manifests differently all the time. Sometimes it was like the full-on package, can't talk, can't speak, can't move. And then sometimes it could be maybe an arm, or maybe a leg decides not to move, but my face is completely fine. Or it could be the other way around, where it's a facial thing, a speech thing, but my limbs are fine. And so in between all of these tests, I would every so often get these attacks. So you're kind of in a way like a time bomb because you don't know when these attacks are gonna come. It was quite stressful and nothing was helping. So, years went by, and, you tend to, you do at certain times when doctors don't really seem to be able to help you after a while and nothing really seems to be that magic pill or that, that magic treatment, you do look for alternative ways because you have to.
Absolutely.
Just basically to find something that can at
your
least,
life,
right? Yeah, and that can give you back a little bit of normality. So, I discovered, well, I shouldn't say just discovered, I knew about it for a long time, but, really had concentrated my focus, I guess, on kind of Eastern treatments, Eastern medication or treatments. So I went to acupuncture. I even tried a bout of cranial sacral, I think it's called, and felt that, did it help? I mean, I don't think that it hurt me. So I certainly didn't get kind of the brain fog that I normally did had I taken all those pills, by the way, of which I actually stopped after a while because I was like, this was just not working for me. And then through the years, I mean, the attacks still came. They still come. In the early days, I had my doctor saying, mostly when people have migraines, they tend to stop after you're in your 40s, after when you're older, sort of a thing. So I was quite hopeful, waiting on the fact that maybe that I wouldn't have these attacks in the future, sort of a thing.
Yeah, that's so unfortunate, though, that the response is, well, eventually you might not have to deal with it.
Well, and one of the other neurologists, because I think through the years I've gone through at least a handful of them, there was a neurologist that basically had said that when it comes to the brain, when it comes to, your head, as an industry or as a specialty, The brain is actually one of the body parts, I guess, of the human anatomy that still is, it's one of the most mysterious things. No one really knows what causes a migraine or what causes kind of that pain. I mean, there's a lot of science that goes beyond it, but it's not always one size fits all. And so and you can see that in like the types of medications that they prescribe to you. They can't guarantee that this would, help or whatnot. So it's something that they keep on needing to research, and hopefully one day they'll be able to find as something. But to date, I have not been told or have seen for myself that they have found that something that can cure or necessarily like treat folks with this condition. But as the years gone by, I've kind of found my own way.
To manage everything?
That's right, yeah. And so you kind of do your own research too as well. Things like stress and, certain things or foods or drinks that, you may want to avoid. You've learned to become a little bit more sensitive in terms of what you're sensitive to. Is it the weather? Is it a certain food type, or is it a certain drink? And, things like that. And so my frequency of attacks through the years have decreased, which is a good thing. Not so great is that when I do get an attack now, it takes upwards of 6 to 8 weeks to fully get back to normal. So it's getting, to walk again, to learn to walk without a cane, to learn how to kind of dress yourself, to be able to pick up a spoon or chopsticks or whatever, to eat and to feed yourself. I'd say those are fine. What is, I would say, the most terrifying in some ways is when you lose bits and pieces of memory. And my last attack actually was, I think it was January of last year. And one of the most scariest things was I actually forgot how, for instance, my husband and I met. I couldn't really pinpoint if were we really married, were we not, and I had to basically depend when I was at home, depend on, pictures around my home to kind of give me clues. My son had texted me, he's now 15, or he's going to be 15 in a couple of weeks. And, he had texted me while I was at home, a day or two after I, had my attack. And I remember looking at my phone and the text and looking at the name. And I was like, I should know this name. But I couldn't, and it was this weirdest thing when people say the images in your mind kind of float and you can't really pinpoint. I know what that means now. Thankfully, within a day, I got kind of most of the things back. But I remember it was the first time ever I lost my passwords. I couldn't get into I couldn't get into my accounts and whatnot, and had to reset them all. We're talking bank accounts and those sorts of things. And so that was a little bit of a scary thing. So you kind of, but you move on afterwards. You just kind of deal with it.
We're married, it's okay.
Right?
I remember now.
Yeah, and you just, what do you do, right? You just, a lot of people, especially after when I wrote my book, I remember when I had my book launch, and I was talking to a few folks, and a lot of the questions was just, how do you move on? And it's you just do, and again, I think a lot of the times is if you've got a really strong support network, which I'm fortunate to have, I know not everybody does, that definitely helps. It gives you that motivation, it gives you that drive, and a purpose, really, just to move on.
And so you kind of share all that with us, and in your book as well, you recount a lot of experiences. How were you able to encompass so much of your feelings and vulnerability into your book?
I just kind of looked out one day, looking at people outside my house, playing or walking on the street or whatnot, and I was like, no, this can't be it. And I just kind of said, like, I just have to do something. I have to do something that will get me out of this rut, and that can just help me just move forward. Because if I don't move forward, then what do I do? What else can I do? And so, just somehow, I've always loved to write. And so, sadly, didn't really have the chance to do it for a living per se, but I've always loved it. And so I just thought, you know what, I'll just put words on paper, start there, and just let things out. And that's what happened. And, it took, I'd say, I can't exactly remember exactly how long, but definitely less than 6 months for sure. I told my story on paper, and it was, I'd say, it was therapy for me. It was it just kind of letting it out, and and of course I didn't think about publishing or any of that. In fact, I just thought it was just going to be a little private diary of sorts or whatnot, right? It was just something to put on paper. And eventually, after I finished writing it, I did share it with like some close friends, and they said that you really should put it out there a little bit more. I don't know. I don't think there's any words really to describe, when people come up to you and after reading your story and they say that they can see themselves in it, or that they finally don't feel as lonely anymore. And like I said, even if it's one person who has what I have, or something similar in the fact that, searching for a cure or searching for someone to even empathize with them or know how difficult it is to get people to understand an invisible disability, which, through the years, I've come to realize that that is what hemiplegic migraine is. It is an invisible disability. And just letting folks that don't have it understand what it's like. And, to have them understand that in the moment when an attack comes, or in the moment when you're having a difficult time, sure, you are a little bit, needing help. You need that extra time to get yourself back up and running. But other than in those instances, you can be a fully contributing member to society. You are still that same person to your family and to your friends. You're not useless. And so long as, the people around you realize that you just need that little bit of time in the moment, and I guess with my story here is to also have people understand that, you are your best advocate. Just because they're doctors, I've come to realize, doesn't necessarily make them, be the best judge of what's best for you. I feel, in the sharing of my book and the sharing of my story, again, if even one person read my story and feel more of a comfort, knowing that they're not the only ones, whether or not it's hemiplegic migraine or another chronic condition, that they're not alone, and that there is hope, right? So long as you yourself, the person who has this condition, feel that there is still hope.
I think that holds a lot of power in not only allowing other people to find it and resonate with the fact that someone else goes through it, but also, like, you're so positive and polite and just a joy to be painting with, that it's like, you're giving other people that sense of hope that they might not have had on their own, which I'm sure that they're very grateful for. You've probably heard that from people who are grateful for having experienced your book and gotten to know you as a person, but that's just my 2 cents from this side of the table.
Well, thank you for sharing that sentiment too as well, Bridget. So that's very kind of you too. Like I said, I certainly, when I decided to write about my experience, right? It even then, like it wasn't about, oh, I have to share my story with the world. I have to share my story. It was actually for quite a selfish reason. Really, it was like I needed to get out of my own rut, and bring back some sort of normality and some sort of purpose. And I was off work then, right? Even and so to start this little project of mine, this personal project of mine, then it at least gave me a sense of purpose, where short of going back and going through exercises of needing to like walk again and getting back my motor skills, the writing was the thing that gave me that purpose to keep on going. Because and in terms of my writing, I gave myself kind of a goal every day, if you will, of okay, so today we got to finish a chapter, right? And once you're done that, you can do whatever else that you want, right? And so I kind of gave myself those. I guess rules or goals, really, just so, again, it's to keep me going.
So on that writing, your process, you mentioned was just kind of like dumping things onto the page and then setting goals for yourself. So would you say your process from a writing standpoint is like very exploratory, or?
It is. People had always asked me to as well, like, is it structured or is it like, but for me, it is like the most unstructured activity or exercise that I do. Even with, sharing of this story, I jumped from places, right? Like I had excerpts from, chapters that are like 10 chapters in, and then I would go back again, either to rewrite, a previous chapter, or kind of to move on to go to the next piece. And possibly because it was kind of like a memoir, right? And so now the question people ask are like, how did I remember all of these things? It's like it's a 10-year kind of a journey thing that I had to recount. And a lot of the times was so when I was pregnant with our youngest son, I had started a journal or a diary where I wrote to him. And I still do. Every month. I don't know when I'm going to be giving him those journals, one day when he's older. But it was in those journals that, of course, I recounted my experiences of the hemiplegia migraine from the day it started to the most recent. So so it was looking up, reminding myself kind of, what had happened through those days, and took snippets from what I recounted in those diaries. And I had kept all of the records from my pharmacist in terms of the medications that were taken, right? And, did the research online too as well in terms of the technical pieces, and basically Frankenstein things together, right? And then try to kind of find the right words to be able to kind of string the journey together in a cohesive way. So that, in terms of how I write or what I did, that is what I do. And a lot of it is, and I think a lot of writers can probably relate to this too, like, the writing actually is probably the easiest part. It's like the editing and the rewriting and the rereading and critiquing is probably the hardest part, I would say. So it was that. But, that in itself was also a process that it was needed. And I think in a way, I'd always said, because it was a true story, it is a true story, and because it's a memoir, it's different than writing, say, fiction, where you make stuff up, right? At least with this piece here, with this story, I didn't have to make anything up. But if anything, though, the challenge was to recall, to remember, and to decipher, what those right words were to relay what that feeling was like, or to relay what that experience was like, whether it be for myself or for those around me. Because of course, I talk a little bit about, my family members or my friends that had to witness or even help me through my trauma, or through my experiences through the year. And so it was also needing to kind of find the right words there, to give it, I'd say, I don't know, justice is not the right word, but to give it the attention and to give it the care that it deserved. Not only for myself, but also again for friends and family that I've also mentioned in my story, because I think a lot of the times too, they're probably even more impacted than the person who has the condition, right? And so that was also another that was also something that was really important for me.
We'll ask you one last question because I've already run over the time that I said I would, so I do apologize, but appreciate your patience and
for sure.
chatting with me. We just like to ask, what is the best piece of advice you've received throughout your life?
Oh, best piece of advice. I'd say keep moving forward. Just keep going. Right. A lot of stuff will come your way, but that's the journey of life. And whenever you kind of meet up with stuff, make your choice and then just move forward. And things will naturally kind of fall into place, and things that are meant to be will be too as well. So I always think, through the years too, I feel that there's been a reason for why things happen. And yeah.
I could not agree more. My mom always says everything happens for a reason, and it's hard to see it
I would agree with your mom.
But yeah.
Yes, in the moment, maybe
Moms
not.
are right sometimes. Say that as I'm talking to a mom. But,
that's right.
But yes, thank you so much. I can't
thank you for
express how
having me.
grateful we were to have you on. And it's not at all done, but we can show our paint by numbers.
Look at that. I barely got mine started too as well. But
we got a flower coming up over here.
There
I
you
think
go.
it's a cat, question mark? I guess I'll find out. So
mine's a flower. I think I picked one.
So pretty. Yes. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. No, thank you.
Hey, it's the Birdabound Besties here. Do you want to be a guest on our show?
If you have a story that's worth sharing with the community, feel free to scan the QR code at the end of this video to be a guest on our show or one of the other amazing on-location shows that are available within Alberta and BC. So if you want to be a guest, scan the QR code.